You got your mama's sunshine. You got your daddy's
Hey
rain.
everybody, welcome to this week's podcast. I've got Pastor Ron, Pastor Tom, Vince, and myself. Once again, the OG crew of Off the Mountain. Are we at 20 episodes yet?
We're at 21.
Over. 21.
I love
21 episodes. So
And we're on the mountain and there's snow outside.
it's beautiful.
Gorgeous.
Yeah, it's a beautiful day. And we were just talking about air quality and how it affects your health and how you guys are starting to feel asthma effects. So basically, you said you have it now.
I've never had asthma in my life. I've had COVID a couple of times. I'm not saying that did this to me.
Right. Well,
Now I have asthma.
One of
We're
my
not saying it didn't either.
Yeah, you never know. One of my good friends had something called exercise-induced asthma, and basically it was from working out and breathing the air and bad air quality. And so I was like, man, that's rough. So it's nice to be up here on the mountain. Breathe some good air.
Breathe well, but it's very, very cold.
I definitely recommend that. And I also recommend just getting outdoors. It's good for your mental. It's good for your spiritual. It's good for your physical health. And that's what we're talking about today. There's definitely a link between the three. And I don't even know how many of us even think about, we think about physical health, and the conversation is starting to be put on the table for mental health, right? Where everyone's really, it's kind of a trend to talk about that right now. But the third thing that we would all agree is important is spiritual health. And so today we've already kind of exhausted the whole physical health thing. And there's a lot of resources online. You can find, pretty much anything. And so we encourage you to listen to our podcast, but also research that on your own, because if your physical health is no good, then are you any good? I mean, let's say that God calls you to go be a missionary in Africa tomorrow. If you're sick, you can't do it. And so, obviously, we have missions at home too. And my mission is my own house. If I'm sick, I can't be a good dad. I can't be a good husband. So it's important to be healthy physically, but mental health is also clearly important. And then there's a connection, I think, between that and spiritual. So what
Definitely a connection. And one of the things that really burdens my heart is we are seeing so many suicides in the church.
Yeah.
One of the leading causes of death, even among children and young people, is suicide today. And it's one of the leading causes of death in the United States. And, I was reading something the other day, and it really touched my heart. An article about a young man who was, I think, 18 years old, and he went out on the Golden Gate Bridge with the intentions of jumping off and killing himself. And the story really touched my heart because he said, I was praying. I don't know if he says praying. Let me take that back. He said, I was really thinking inside of myself, hoping that someone would stop and try to talk me out of what I was going to do. And he said, I was just waiting for someone to do that. And finally, a lady comes by and she wanted to talk to me, I could tell. And I thought, wow, this could be it. And she wanted me to take a picture of her on the bridge. And then I took a picture of her and she just walked off. And so he was really wanting badly someone to talk him out of it. Also, I was telling you on the way up here, the people who have survived a suicide attempts off the Golden Gate Bridge. I was reading an article the other day again, and I have no reason to believe it's not true, that I think there was like 20-some people that jumped off the bridge and survived. And the writer who was writing the article said all 20-something of those people, the minute they jumped and their feet left the bridge, had regrets. And they wished they had not done it.
Wow.
And so then I had something else that I was going to read I thought was really intriguing. And this article was by Stacy Friedenthal, PhD, and was titled, Where Are They Now? The Fate of Suicide Attempt Survivors. He said what Dr. Friedenthal found was that 515 persons who intended to jump from the bridge and were stopped, only 7% of them went on to actually kill themselves at some point later in life. He said what's remarkable about that is very often suicide tendencies are temporary. If you can just get through that season.
And what they're doing is they're making a permanent decision for something that could be temporary.
Yes.
Yeah. And that's the sad part.
And so, I was doing a little research, and we just decided we were going to talk about this morning. But who is at risk for suicide And people who have a history of suicide attempts, depression, chronic pain, people living with chronic pain. It goes on, it says a family history of suicide, family history of mental disorder or substance use, exposure to family violence, including physical or sexual abuse. And it goes on and on and on. Guys, we got a problem on our hands. We've got a problem. And now in a church our size, where we're exposed to a lot of people, we're doing a lot of funerals.
Well, you know, if I can touch on one of those things, because my wife lives in chronic pain every day of her life. She has a hybrid Crohn's, which attacks all the organs. She takes a medication that helps. And one of the things that my wife has asked me to do, she probably asked me about a decade ago, please don't wake up in the morning and ask me how I feel, because it's going to be the same thing. I don't feel well, and you're going to make me think about it. My wife uses her efforts to make a contribution in the public school system, make a contribution to other people. And that is something that she says, if you don't get me thinking that way, which we all have a negative bias, she goes, I'm okay. Yeah. So we've made a deal. I don't wake up and say, how are you feeling today? I wake up and I go, so we got a long day ahead of us.
Well, there's
an action-packed day.
And there are so many people that live in pain, and there are different types of pain. I mean, there's physical, obviously, but there's also emotional and mental pain. There's all kinds of different things that people deal with, you know. One of the things that I've learned through being in therapy myself and dealing with depression is that people that often do commit suicide, it's a emotional response, and a lot of times it's made out of anger. It's kind of a revenge move, and it's temporary. That feeling, you know, is temporary, and they just are emotional, and they say, "I'll show you," and they do it.
And Josh, we have to be so cognizant of that, because I had a funeral a few years ago, and a lady had said to her son, he was young, she said, you know, you're always talking about suicide, talking about, why don't you just go do it? Just do it. And he did. He did. And he killed himself. And then I had another true story of a mountain place I used to go to quite often, and the caretaker had a wife, and I don't know what happened. I just heard the end result, that she went down to town to shop. She comes back. He's sitting on the porch with a gun in his hand. He waited for her to come down the driveway, and then he proceeded to kill himself. And it goes along with what you're saying. I have a loved one who, I know one of the reasons is chronic pain. I have a loved one who took their life because they were in chronic pain.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, again, I don't know about you guys, but I probably sit with at least 8 or 10 people a year that are suicidal. And so I want to address this a little bit. And I don't want to just talk about the problem only, but I want to get into some solutions that, again, we're not professionals. We're not doctors.
I agree.
But one thing I do want to say, and I really encourage you to get your young people and anybody around you who might be in depression and maybe suicidal to hear what I'm going to say next. I've seen a lot of people really, what's the word I want to use? They look at me as if a light has just went on in a dark place when I say something that I think everyone needs to hear. I'm a Christian. I have a different belief system than many people out there. But I say, do you know when you kill yourself, according to the Bible, life doesn't end. Right. You just wake up in another sphere of life, and things could be worse more than better. There's this idea that I'm going to take my life and fall to sleep and everything's going to be over. I'm just going to go to sleep. Yeah. That's not reality according to our worldview. You're going to immediately still be alive. And at that point, if you've ever seen the movie Ghosts, you can't come back over to the other side. You're on another side now. And so I want to hear what you guys have to say, because I have quite a bit to say about this subject.
Yeah, I think that, you know, there's a spiritual side to it too. I do believe that that the devil's real. I believe that he's got, you know, his little cronies, and I think that he wants to destroy, and he wants to destroy your self-confidence, your self-worth. He wants to destroy your hope. He wants to destroy your ability to see beyond the hurdle right? There's that old saying, people think it's in the Bible. It's not, but it's a good saying. And the saying is, this too shall pass, right?
Right.
Which is true. We've seen this throughout our whole lives, that when a difficult moment, presents itself, it's going to pass one way or another. It's going to pass. It's going to go away, right? There are seasons. I've been really kind of delving into this idea of seasons and how we're supposed to react based on the season, right? In Ecclesiastes 3, Solomon or the writer, he writes about, there's a time to do this and there's a time to do that. And he gives all these opposite actions. There's a time to give birth. There's a time to die. There's a time to plant. There's a time to uproot what is planted, right? There's a time to grieve, and there's a time to be happy, right? If you're at a funeral, it would be really inappropriate for somebody in the third or fourth row to be laughing at a video on their phone, right?
Right.
Very inappropriate because it's not the time and the place. But if you are, out at a park and you're playing with your kids, and it would be very appropriate to laugh and play with them. But it'd be kind of weird if you're crying, during that time, unless you're going through something. So there's these emotional responses to a real thing. But I think that the devil, I really do believe that he makes it look much bigger than it actually is, and he blinds us to the doors of retreat, to the doors of getting out of that situation.
And you're saying that it's a season, and this doctor seemed to indicate that, it's usually a season you have to get through.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have to realize that, like Tom said, that we don't want to have a permanent solution for a temporary problem.
I think the Bible, if we go back to Scripture, will tell you in James that we're to consider it joy. But I don't know if it says ha-ha joy. We're supposed to consider it as an opportunity to look at a trial, look at a situation, and see how it can work out. It's almost putting the opposite in action. My wife gets to work with a lot of children, and she will say nowadays that kids are working through problems earlier. How many times do you deal with somebody and they didn't deal with the problem, but when they get older and they're dealing with trauma, they'll lead back with, well, when I was a kid.
Yep.
So it's like you'll go backwards, and so sometimes the kids are told not to talk about it, not to deal with it. But when they get older, they're going to, because they're going to tell us many a times, well, when I was a child, this happened to me.
Well,
So I think the awareness is saying, let's deal with it. Let's get it out in the open. And I do believe the Bible says if we confess to each other what's going on, there's a healing element in who we're confessing to, people that can probably help you do something about it.
I think one of the biggest goals that I have, and I think a lot of people share this, is I want to grow. I want to grow in maturity. I want to grow spiritually. I want to grow, and healthy people grow, right? When you're not healthy, your growth is stunted in a way, and then some people can even revert and go backwards mentally or spiritually, right? Even physically, right? You can go backwards. And so I think it's so important for us to have healthy habits, and not just physical, but spiritual and mental as well. You said something to me a long time ago, Dad. You said I was dealing with some anger issues, and you said I was losing my temper. You said that's a habit, and I never even saw it like that. But then I started to think, yes, it's as simple as discipline in your mind and thinking the thoughts. That if you think negative thoughts or think angry thoughts, then you're gonna act angry. You're gonna act negatively.
And the same way, if you think lustful thoughts, you're always going to be lustful.
Right. But then the opposite is true too. If you wake up and choose, today I'm going to think about what good I have in this life. I'm going to be thankful. I'm going to think about the things that God has given me, the gifts, the privileges, the opportunities, the fact that I have a roof over my head, that I have food on the table, all these things. And your whole attitude can change. And then like today, I chose to be positive and to be right in my thinking. And so all of a sudden I'm texting people encouraging things. It's just coming out naturally.
Can we just say this? It's a mindset.
Yeah.
It's setting
It really
your
is.
mind to something. Jesus says that we're supposed to take every thought captive and obedient to the word. So it's allowing you to do something with that thought.
There's a new term in psychology called growth mindset.
Yes.
And that is what you want. You want to have a growth mindset, and that's physical, spiritual, and mental.
Well, Josh, let me give you a verse right here that exactly describes what you're saying. It says, finally, brethren, whatsoever things are true, honest, just, things that are pure, whatsoever things are lovely, whatsoever things are of good report, if there's any virtue, if there's any praise, set your mind on these
those
things.
things.
These are the things you're to think about.
Yeah.
And going back to seasons too. I mean, have you ever had this happen to you? You have something that happens, maybe it's late at night, and it's the most awful thing in the world, or maybe it happens earlier on the day, and you get so consumed thinking about that thing, and you go, "This is just horrible. My life is over." You maybe watch a television program, get something to eat, go to bed. The next morning, you don't feel that way. You think, "Well, that wasn't all that bad." It's a season, and it gets foggy. Now, let me ask you guys honestly. I think I already know your answer to this question. Have you ever been seriously had suicidal thoughts and been suicidal? I really haven't. I mean, I've had times where I guess it's entered my mind, but no real problem with it. I've never had a real problem with being suicidal.
Well, can't we say it starts with that thought? And I think Josh hit it on the head a little earlier when he said that you may not have anything that you think is worthy after that. I'll say this because you were there with me during my heart issue. I lost all confidence in myself.
Yeah.
So then I started thinking, well, what worth do I have anymore?
But were you ever suicidal?
Well, but I can see how somebody starts going down the rabbit hole.
Down that hole, okay.
But I had you to talk to. I had, people were there. I mean, and I think that is probably one of the biggest things as you deal with people, you want to get them talking. Yeah. Because somebody will have a different point of view than you. They'll either point out the good things, right?
Right.
Because we have a negative bias. And we've talked about that before on the show, because that's supposed to protect us from danger. So our mind's going to go there. And if we stay there, we're going to keep going down the negative hole. That's why you have to have relationships that are in your life to reach out to. Because I do think, Pastor, if I'd have stayed in that mindset without a growth perspective, I would have sat there and went, well, I won't have any more worth. And I do think that's when you lose hope. But if you have somebody there to throw you a life preserver and as you're thinking about, drag you to the shore and say, let's just start someplace.
Yeah, and I'm not trying to be, very self-righteous, like I've never thought of doing that. It just makes me sometimes curious as to why some people are more prone to that and others not. Because like I say, I've been in some really dark places, but suicide was never a viable alternative for me.
I mean, obviously, I've went through my struggles with depression, and I've thought about suicide before. I don't know how close I was to actually doing it, but had those thoughts.
But you did something about it, right, Josh?
Well, when it came down to it, Tom, it was like either I'm gonna face the realities that are in my life that are difficult, or I'm going to run away. And to me, running away could be suicide, or it could be alcohol, or it could be literally running away, or it could be anything. And so I think that there's a mindset of giving up versus not giving up.
Yeah.
And it's hard sometimes to see around the corner. I mean, it's impossible to see around the corner, but the fact that I just knew that life would still be worth living, it just hit me. And I also was on prescription medication.
There you go. I want to talk about that.
I think had an effect on me majorly. And so,
but Josh,
let me say this, I still am on prescription medication, but it's completely different. And it's a low dose, and it's just something that works for me. I have no problem saying that because it works for me.
Right.
Josh,
but you do have to be careful, and you have to be honest with your doctors, and you have to have a lot of accountability, which I do.
Tom's going to ask you a question. I want to ask you a question after
Josh,
that.
I want to ask you a question, but did you have people in your life that kept encouraging you?
Absolutely. And that's the thing, Tom.
I think that's the key. I really
The community's key.
I went through some difficult stuff, and I had a lot of people treat me differently than I thought they were going to. They were there and they said, "Hey,
in what
man,
way?"
Non-judgy, just like, "Hey, we're here to help. What can we do to help?"
They didn't say, "Grow up.
No,
Get this out of your system. Come on."
no.
rub some grass on it.
No,
Yes.
I think those
Put your big
voices,
boy pants on.
Those voices were in my own head.
Yes.
And when I went to therapy, I think one of the questions that they ask if you're suicidal, and I'm like, no, I'm not right now, obviously. because I'm in this place where I'm getting help. But then they go on to ask you other questions, and they ask you questions about your self-worth, and I don't know, like this could turn into a whole therapy session right now, which I don't want it to, and I could get really deep and really wild with it. But I've always struggled with self-worth, and I think that somehow I justified that through the Bible, through the Word. So like when Jesus says, for those who love their life, they'll lose it, but if you lose your life for my sake, you'll find it. And so
You thought you were supposed to
I
lose.
thought I was supposed to. Well, I've learned what that actually means.
Right.
Loving life and loving yourself are different things. Okay. When Jesus said those that love your life, it's saying that you love going out there and making something yourself and not wanting any help. And you just love like the experiences more than anything else, which is a selfish person, right? That's what Jesus was saying. If you're a selfish person, you're going to go out there and you're going to look out for yourself. You're going to seek out the things that fill you up, and you're not going to think about anybody else. So Jesus was saying, no, that's not how you find life. How you find life is you learn to live beyond yourself.
Yes.
And you learn that your self-worth comes from reaching out to other people to give them a hug, to give them a high five or a text or whatever it is. Your self-worth comes through what you give to the community. And everybody has worth. God doesn't make mistakes. God didn't create us to because God didn't when we were born, God didn't say, oops, that one got through. I don't know how that got through. No, when we were born, God said, yep, that one has a special gift. That one has a special gift.
Isn't one of our goals, one of our goals as a Christian believer is to get to a place where we don't even think about ourselves.
Yeah, and that's a really loving place to be. And it doesn't mean that you don't also love yourself and see the worth that you have for yourself. I mean, we should see ourselves as God sees us, as heirs, as
Not
children.
loving yourself, but not thinking of yourself. Thinking,
There's a
as you say,
difference.
beyond yourself.
There's a difference,
Let
yeah.
me ask you a question that I was going to say before Tom asked his question, and that is, when you had maybe these moments that maybe I'm suicidal, maybe I want to take my life, was the thought back in your mind that you would just go to sleep and it would be over and it'd
I
be
never
restful?
thought that far.
Never thought that far ahead.
No, I was in a bad spot mentally because of the prescriptions. Also because I just was in a funk. I was in a funk.
Why
and I
can't we
was-
get these prescriptions outlawed? I mean, some of them are really, really bad.
Well, some of them are, and some of them help. It's weird because some of these prescriptions actually help people, and some of them
work,
don't
yeah.
help people. So it's like it really. I think the responsibility comes down to the individual to be honest with their provider, and the provider has to have the wisdom to help them. And so it's a revolving door.
Okay, it works different for different people.
It does.
But the thing about it is, and I feel like I can talk about this a lot because I have 50 years of working with a lot of suicidal people.
Yeah.
A man was in my office not too long ago, and I talked with him for a while, and I said, "You're not suicidal, are you?" He said, "Well, I was, but I'm not now."
Yeah.
I said, "You wouldn't take your life, would you?" And he goes, "Come on, Pastor Ron, you know me better than that. I got my kids, this and that."
Yeah.
He went home and took his life, shot himself in the presence of his kids.
Right.
But I found out later he was on a lot of prescription drugs. A doctor was handing them out to him like candy.
Well, I mean-
these doctors have to become a little more responsive. Some doctors, not
I
a
mean,
lot.
I don't want to go on a rant
But-
with prescriptions, but we are one of maybe 2 countries in the world that has advertisements for prescriptions.
Right.
You know the advertisement on TV where it says here, this will do this for you,
Yeah.
and then here's the side effects. Talk
Right.
to your provider, talk to your doctor about this.
Right.
And so we can walk into our doctor's office and say, "Hey, I read about this. Is it good?" And if that doctor is prescribing that medication because they've signed on with the sales rep, right? Like then it's a whole business.
Okay, for our listeners out there, especially if you have kids under 18, I hope you're looking at the prescription drugs that these doctors are giving your kids.
Right.
You're looking at these and you're studying them and going, "Hey, what are some of the repercussions of this drug?" That's your
Well,
responsibility.
the particular medication that I was on, I don't want to say it because I'm not going to open up
Right.
myself to that. But like, and it's not because I'm afraid of the company. It's because I know that this actually helps some people. But they give this to kids, and I man, to think about giving a kid something that alters your brain chemistry while your brain is developing, like what does that actually do? It's scary. It's really,
Right.
really scary.
Yeah.
And what I've learned to this point, again, not an expert, I'm planning on continuing my education in this world because I think it's really interesting and I think it's really needed. But as far as the medications and all this stuff go, they were never meant to fix you. They are meant to get you through a season. They're meant to get you to the point where your behaviors will change, and then you will be able to actually be healthy.
I was thinking about today. I went to the gym this morning, and in all of our cars, we have these instrument panels. We have these things that tell us about our oil and our temperature and all this stuff.
Yep.
And very often when a warning light comes on, you're supposed to go to the mechanic and find out why it's going on. But what if we went to a mechanic and he goes, man, what's your problem? And I say, this warning light's coming on all the time. I'm not even sleeping at night. I mean, every day it's bugging me that my warning light's on and I got to take this car in and get it fixed. He said, well, I'll fix that for you and just spray some black paint over all the glass work that shows
Right.
your warning lights. He said,
Right.
okay, now it's not going to bother you anymore, Ron.
Yeah.
You're going to sleep well at night because you're not
Right.
going to see this.
Right.
We have to get to the root cause.
Well, that
so
is the
good.
mentality of our medical system. I think there's a lot of issues. We can go really far down that hole. But when it comes down to it, what I learned is behavioral therapy does work. It doesn't give you a high. It doesn't make you feel better in an instant like a
Yeah.
drug does. But it definitely, in the long run, it's what works. And
You could almost be a person on TV advertising for this place you went to up north in Washington.
so I went to a place up north. It's north of Seattle. It's called the Center, a place for hope. And it was really cool. I was able to, and I'm fortunate to do this. Not everybody can do this. I was able to take a month. My wife was very gracious. My family, you guys work was, obviously I work for you guys, and you guys are very gracious to allow me to do that. But it changed my life. And up there, I relearned how important little things matter. I did something called DBT. It's dialectical behavioral therapy, and I know it probably sounds pretty broad and pretty kind of
Lofty, maybe.
just something that is unattainable. Like it's like, what is that, right?
Right.
But it was just a bunch of really simple things you can do to just control your emotions and think positively and think about things. It was just basic.
You said simple behaviors.
It's simple behaviors. People can use this to quit smoking. They can use it to get out of a bad relationship. They can use it to become better in their job. Like it was something that I learned so much there that I thought, man, like why aren't we teaching this to our kids? Like, why aren't we teaching? One of the things that I learned that's in DBT is emotion regulation, for example, right? And it's not suppressing your emotions. It's acknowledging your emotions and then checking to see if the real world facts, the things that are actually happening around you, fit your emotions.
Now, you're not
And
the
then-
only person that was really high on this place. Can you tell our audience the name of it or have them
I just
email
did.
you?
Yeah, I just did. It's called the Center, a Place for Hope in Edmonds, Washington.
Say it again slower.
The Center, a Place for Hope in Edmonds, Washington. It's under a psychologist named Gregory Gantz, and he's cool, man. He's a cool dude. I didn't really get to talk to him much because he's a busy guy, but he's got a whole team of people up there that are just really. I mean, what was cool about that place is they had they believed in whole health, the whole person health. So they had they had mental training, they had spiritual training. And then they also were big on diet. They were like, we don't want you to eat a lot of sugar. We don't want you to have a lot of preservatives. They basically didn't want you to have any candy, any sugar at all.
Right.
They said the only thing you could have is dark chocolate if it's a certain amount, a percentage, like 60% or something like that, because it has mental health benefits. They didn't want us to have, obviously, alcohol or drugs, obviously, but then not even kombucha. They're like, that has alcohol in it. I was like, all right, cool. So I just I was eating clean. I was exercising. I'm up in Washington. It was just, it was an opportunity that I know, and this is what bothers me. It bothers me that not everyone that needs that is going to get that. And so I want to somehow someday work to where we can give that kind of help and therapy to the masses, to the people
Josh,
that need
I
it.
want to start. We've got this beautiful ranch that we're on right now. there is no reason why we can't start helping some people that want to come to this ranch.
Yeah. And you know, let me say this too. It wasn't like I went up there and then came back and everything was perfect. It was far from it. I came back to the real world because I was in kind of a bubble. I came back and I had to learn how to apply these things. And I feel like even just today I woke up and I'm like, I feel like I'm waking up. I feel like I'm actually starting to be able to regulate how I feel and what I think about and what I do to an extent to where, you know, see, it's funny because I have spoken a lot at church. I'm a pastor, and you know, I've been in the church world. People think that our lives are perfect and everything. And the thing I've learned about that is you can't just pray this stuff away. And when I say that, if you're struggling mentally or spiritually or even physically, and you pray and ask God to help you, it's only going to work if you listen as well, and you actually act upon the things that God tells you to do.
Right.
See, I believe that God led me up to this place.
Yes.
And I prayed about it, very much so.
We were all praying about
Yeah.
it.
So prayed about it. I ended up in the right place. Now, is that place for you? I have no idea. God knows, right? And so He will make a way, and He always does. And so, yeah, prayer is a huge thing. I'm not knocking prayer. Prayer changes things. Prayer does everything. But you also have to listen to God's response,
Yeah.
and you also have to act upon
Okay,
it.
I want to go somewhere with that in just a moment. But I am dead serious about why can't we do something here? And you're going to hear more about this because some people can't afford it. Their insurance won't pay for it.
Right.
On and on and on. Let me ask you something, Vince. Now you're probably Josh's best friend. Have you seen a difference in Josh since he came back from that place?
Yeah, I think just being able to see your daily routines. I mean, you're not, like you said, I love that you said you didn't come back all perfect. Like
No,
everything was
not at all.
fixed.
Yeah.
But being able to see him be able to manage things on daily better, I think that's been a huge change. And, you know, that's
Well, see,
all
I
you
want to
can
go
ask for.
deeper. I've seen a big change.
Yeah.
I've seen a real big change since you come back. But let's go to something else here because I believe in the holistic thing. And now I'm going to say something here. And for those of you listening out there that, you know, you're not a believer, you're not a Christian. And if you are, you're not radical like myself. But I have sat with several suicidal people. And through counseling, I've come to the conclusion that theirs is a spiritual problem on top of whatever else it might be. I know of 3 people off the top of my head that I have helped through their suicidal tendencies purely by spiritual warfare and prayer. That was the main approach that we used.
Sure.
And again, this is going to sound very far-fetched to many people, but in 2 deliverances I've done over the past 50 years, one of them in particular, a evil spirit spoke through the person and said, I'm going to kill this person.
Mm-hmm.
And there's nothing you're going to do about it. I've had another situation or two where the spirits reveal themselves through a person. I know that's radical for some people out there, but they say we're going to kill this person. So I think there can be some situations where there's spiritual stuff involved.
Can I put a cap on that?
Okay.
I agree with you that I think that if somebody's going through a problem and it's spiritually rooted, and you pray hard for them, you can release them. The problem is what if they go back, and what if they go back and they start doing the wrong things?
Well, if you're a smart counselor, you don't just bring them into 2 or 3 prayer sessions,
Right.
but you follow them through for
Yeah,
you.
and give them accountability.
You have to.
and get them involved in community, right? And
Right.
it's all these things, they all work together.
Now that we're kind of taking a different turn and going into the spiritual realm.
Can I say something to
sure.
suicide too that we didn't address with parents? Because you asked the guys, have you ever had a suicidal thought? And my suicidal thought came when I was in high school, and it's completely different than yours. And I remember being a freshman, and what Tom said was key: having good community. I was at a youth group event, and I was really, really young, and I for sure was like, I could do this. And the root of it was, I'm trying not to get emotional. The root of it was that I was wearing my parents' baggage. They had just got divorced. I thought it was my fault. I'd hear my mom and dad fight about not being able to make bills, not having money for this. And I thought, I'm a burden. Like I am the burden. Like it cost it. Like they can't feed me. I'm the root of their fight. And I felt that it would be easier for them not to have me.
Terrible.
And how?
And
how
I'm like, I'm
long
trying not to
that
be
is.
emotional about this. I'm like
I
holding
tell
in. But and it didn't come from like, it wasn't like this, I'm going to get revenge after you. I know we had talked about that, or I felt it was just wearing. So for you parents that are out there and you have young ones in the house,
Yes.
just be careful
Yes.
and in your language and how you treat, and your kids hear everything. You might be in your room arguing and saying stuff. Your kids are listening. You might be in a place where, you think your kids aren't aware of what's happening, but they're very aware. And that was hard for me. And the big thing, I remember that night, Jim Cruz got up, and I know Jim won't mind me using his name. He said, somebody in this room is singing about suicide tonight. He's like, I'm stopping the whole service. He's like, I want you to get up and sing. I was like, nah, I don't care anymore. Whatever you say doesn't matter. And I just felt this urging, God, like you said, a spiritual side, so you need to say something to him.
Yeah.
You need to do it. And like you said, Josh, reacting on it.
Yeah.
And I went and talked to him afterwards, and he didn't, it wasn't a one-time thing. It was like, he knew what I was going through, and he started addressing things in my life. He's like, that's not your, he, like he said, it wasn't one session, it was more than one session. Where he helped me get through that time in my life where I felt like I was wearing those burdens of
Definitely.
my parents.
Yeah, that's a cool story. I know.
And I'm not blaming my
Heard
parents.
that
I
one.
don't want my parents, I know they obviously
No,
listen,
yeah.
and I've talked to my dad about this, but
Yeah. Well,
it's
now
just,
you're an adult. You understand.
yeah,
that
yeah. And it
life
was
is-
right. And I understand what they were going through. And like I had shared in another podcast, they had lost a child early on, and they were dealing with stuff that I couldn't even imagine.
Right.
But I just thought that burden is too hard to wear.
Ultimately, and this is where I think it's important to understand, ultimately our actions and our words come from our beliefs. And so if you pray for somebody and they do change that day, it's because they believed it so much that it changed their behaviors and it changed their thought patterns from that day on. And I do believe that happens.
Well, we're talking about holistic healing. We've been talking about that the last 3 weeks. And again, when we sit down to counsel people, we realize that we have to check out, because I'm a pastor, I'll start with the spiritual first. Let's check that out.
Right.
Because I'm not saying the majority of them are spiritually connected. Some are.
Yeah.
And so you check out the spiritual realm. Then from there, you go to the physical realm. Then you go to the emotional realm. I mean, there's some people that medically or physically, they're just missing some kind of nutrients in their body.
I listen
and,
to you two talk a lot on the way up here. We drive, it's about an hour drive, and we all drive together, and I think that's by design, right? But I listen to you two, and you guys were talking about like the importance of just listening to people all the way through.
Yes.
And so you're talking about how like you might start with somebody and they have a complaint. They say, Pastor, help me with this. And then you find out that it's actually really just a simple practical change that they need to make. But then sometimes you find out that it is spiritual.
Yes.
Sometimes you find out that it's something that happened to them as their child, or it's trauma or whatever it is. And then we need to lead them to the right place.
And I've said it before, and I'll repeat it. I'm kind of a radical type of Pentecostal believer when it comes to my spiritual beliefs. But when someone comes to me and they're hurting, let's say they are in back pain, they have back pain so bad they can't stand up. At that point, I really am not so concerned about how I get rid of that back pain. I just want to get rid of it. If I have to call up a chiropractor and have them see them, pop them, that's great. If I have to have one of the doctors in the church prescribe them some medicine, if that'll get rid of their pain, great. If I have to take authority over some spirit that might be involved, I'll do that. We just want to see them well.
Yeah.
So we're not off balance, I don't think, in any one area. And again, I realize that some of our listening audience think that we're from a different planet, but I really, really do believe in the Bible. And I believe that in some cases, spirits can make people ill physically and mentally and spiritually.
Yeah,
in
absolutely.
some cases. So you need to have a good counselor, someone that will look at every angle, not just one.
Well, if you think about it, the Bible, the way that God especially moved through Paul to write down, all these words and these letters to these churches, where he's just saying, through God, he's saying that you all have different gifts, and your gift serves a different purpose, and that purpose is specific to the time and the moment that you are in, and it's so crazy. You could pray over them and cast out the demons, right? And then send them to Tom, and Tom will get them plugged in a Bible study, and then send them over to somebody else, and they will make sure that this person has accountability or they're getting the right support group or whatever it is. I think of support groups. I think of like the Set Free that we have, right?
Yeah,
been doing it. The Parkers, Rich and Carol have been doing this for years. And there's other leaders out there too, but that's who I think of when I think of that. And there's people that go every single Friday night, and they have been off of alcohol and drugs or whatever it is that they were struggling with for years, but they still go. Yeah. Why do they still go? Yeah. Because there's a community aspect to it too. And that's our goal. Like our goal is to acknowledge what the hurdle is and help people get past the hurdle so that they can get connected.
Yes.
To the church.
And I don't think you will ever be back at that place again.
No.
I'm your dad. I've seen that.
So what's good too? One of the big changes is that I started talking about this stuff.
Yes. And you had a great support team all around you.
But I never talked about it before because I was kind of ashamed, or I didn't think people would understand. I honestly didn't think people would understand.
Josh, that is one of the key things. I deal with a lot of guys with trauma. You got to start talking about it.
Yeah.
And it didn't start today.
Right.
It started someplace farther back.
Sure.
And as you get them talking about it, sometimes they're just buried with 2 or 3 different things.
Another reason why I didn't like talking about it is because I grew up with people. I mean, Vince grew up in your sister died when you were young.
Right.
Like you've went through it.
Yeah.
And so like I've grown up around people that had a lot of different hurdles in their lives, big challenges, big life altering challenges. And I always thought, man, my life's been pretty good. Like I don't have any of these issues, but it was other things that affected me in a certain way and how I processed them. And so I learned to not be ashamed. Everyone has a different story, and everyone has a different effect from life before. And you just have to get into a place where you choose to be healthy.
And I think we're being educated today.
Yeah.
We have to treat depression as a sickness.
Definitely.
I think there was a time and place in some of the old timers' lives where someone would call in and say, I broke a leg. Okay, I can't come to work. I understand. I'm depressed. I can't come to work. Oh my goodness. Put your big boy pants on and get yourself down here.
Right.
We're looking at it differently now.
Right. And if you think about how it affects the spiritual side, right? I don't know if you want to go there yet, but if you think about how it affects the spiritual side, if I'm down and depressed and thinking about all the negative things in my life, what's the last thing I want to do? Last thing I want to do is worship or pray or read the Bible,
Right.
The
very thing that's going to help you.
The very thing that's going to help you, or get called out by a friend who's spiritual, like that's the last thing.
Let's switch directions here for a moment, Josh. We brought a young man into our home. He was 17 years old, and he tried to take his life 3 times with us. And I know this young man won't mind us talking about it because he's a man now.
Yeah.
And he's like my second son, so I know I can say this. I first found him or became aware of him when someone called me and said he had, taken 90-some pills in the hospital, given up for dead. And I went up and visited him and got such a burden for him. I mean, it was all divine because when I went up to see him and I saw all these machines he was hooked up to, and they basically told me he's going to die. He's done. My heart and that young man's heart at 17, we got bonded right there in that hospital room. Remember, I went home that day and I told my wife, I can't do anything. I'm just so overburdened for this kid. Now, you'll remember this probably a day or two later on Sunday, I went to church and I got him. I said, there's this young man that I have a burden for and he's laying up in the hospital dying. The doctor said there's no hope for him. He's taken 90-some pills to take his life. And I had the whole congregation stand, and I said, I want you to point your hands toward the hospital, and let's pray. And again, you can say it was a miracle, or you can say it was coincidence. That very day when we prayed, he came out of the coma and shocked the doctors and everybody. Well, long story short, we took him home with us to live with us. He tried to take his life twice more. And I mean, he did it well. This kid wasn't just threatening. He did it. Well, he took a bunch of more pills and did some other things. Can we talk about that for 5 minutes? You were there.
Yeah.
I would like, I know he won't mind.
No, yeah.
To use his story because he's doing fabulous today.
Right. That's part of the, that's one of the topics that kept, was brought up over
Right.
and over in therapy. And I was maybe 7 years old.
you were young.
and he tried to take his life in my room. And I love this guy too. He's like a brother to me. But when I was young, I didn't understand life. You don't understand anything. And so I thought, okay, I was like, that's interesting. So if things get bad, you can just do that.
Yes.
And it was almost like it normalized it at a young age for me. But it was also a very good thing that you were doing to bring this guy in. And I look now and I see like he's had children that are involved in ministry. Like they're good. Like he's got a good family and good people, that
He ran
he's affected.
marathons, became a professional,
a lot of
got
good
a lot of
things.
degrees, a lot of college degrees.
But still, we all still struggle. And I think that, the fact that I had to actually acknowledge that and see that was the source of pain, it's like a wound that never heals, or it's like
Yeah.
something, it's like an opportunity that the devil can get in and he can, press that wound. He can make you feel discomfort.
Let's
make
go
you
back to
feel
this young man. He had lost all of his support group.
bad. Right.
When he came to us and he accepted me as his father, and didn't know him from Adam before this, he had lost his whole support group.
Yeah.
His dad, his mom, his brother, he had lost his girlfriend, he had lost everything. And at that point, for reasons we'll never know, God brought us into his life and we adopted him, per se.
Yeah, and that's just one story out of a million stories that people have that it affects you. And and as a man, you don't want to talk about it. You don't want to. You want to just
don't.
bury it. You want to
Right.
be tough. You want to say that doesn't bother me. None of this bothers me. But the truth is, if you are drinking, half a bottle of whiskey at night or you're doing drugs, like it's bothering you.
Right.
And you are doing something about it. I don't think there's a huge difference between people that put a gun to their head and pull the trigger versus people that drink themselves to death. I mean, there isn't. It's just one slower than the other. One's more finite.
Well-
you know what I mean? It's just,
It's what Tom brought up, the death of despairs, and you know a lot about this, right?
Yeah.
Like the idea of that the thing you're killing yourself slowly.
death of
basically,
despair,
right?
yeah, is something that was coined a few years ago by a doctor, and it's basically just you gave up on life. You work your job, you bring the money home, so you can have that chair and you can sit in it and watch football or TV and just
Right.
drink. It's just you've given up. And my message to anybody who feels that way is first of all, you can definitely change, right?
Yes.
It's habits, but habits are hard to change, but you can change them.
Right.
Right. You can start to get healthy. And when you do, your whole perspective changes, right?
Well, let's talk about solutions. Again, I'm always wanting to guide this podcast down the right road. And I think very often we present the problem and we illustrate it very well, but we need to talk about solutions. For example, maybe someone out there today is thinking, I don't have a future, I don't have a hope. Well, come to the Lord.
Mm-hmm.
Give your life to him. He has a purpose for you. Would you agree with me when I say that God has a purpose for every person on this planet?
I agree.
Yeah.
He has a purpose. He has a plan.
Pastor, I think if you're out there and you're listening, there's a difference between being stuck. I think we're all going to get stuck. Yeah. We're all going to get someplace, get stuck, but it's the difference between choosing to stay there
Yep.
or to go forward. And that's what you're saying. If you're out there and you haven't tried Jesus,
Yeah.
try it. You'll like it.
and
I mean, some people are so afraid of that, or they want to be so against it because that's what my grandma, my grandpa, my mom and dad said. And some people push back on that, don't they?
Yeah.
Just because. And so if you got to hear it from somebody different, hear it from us. If you're out there and you haven't tried it, no, I say try it. There was a research paper that came out, and I'll read it. It was from a guy named Stephen Goldwyn with MarketWatch. And this is what he said. He said, states that experience a large decline in religious participation in the last 15 years of the 20th century saw a larger increase in deaths of despair. That means things that were working in people's lives started to take a decline. So you started to almost get rid of something that was helping people.
Well, AA, right, started as a Christian organization. People don't like to say that anymore, but it did.
It did.
It started as Christian.
All 12 steps did.
Right, exactly.
Because what's one of the 12?
Right.
You got to have a God.
Yeah, and one of the big aspects of AA is that you need to It's the prayer of I forget the prayer.
It's the ones that you've got to know
Basically-
what you can change and what you can't change, and God give you the grace to know the difference.
Right. And so, like, if you understand that there are a lot of things that can happen in life and you have no control over those, you don't have to worry about those things. You don't have to stress about those things, right? But if there's something that you do that you can change, you can put your hand to the plow and you can work on that. And that
Right.
gives us self-worth, right?
Yeah.
It goes back to that whole
Right.
thing of like taking care of your family and your community, but also the community aspect of AA is why it works, right? It's the accountability.
Community, yeah.
It's like, hey, brother, hey, sister, where were you? We missed you. You know, we missed
yes,
you.
yes, yes.
And just hearing that right there, like we missed you, is huge.
And then what about an accomplishment? You get a chip.
You get a coin.
I've got a friend who
Yeah,
just
the
got a
coins, man.
36-year chip. He's so excited.
Yeah.
And I go, can you remember the bad days? And he goes, like they were yesterday.
Yeah.
But he's also realized the journey has been worth it. And I always like to tell guys when they've been there, we've all got to realize that there's parts of our lives where we didn't do things right, and there's been wreckage in our life.
Yeah.
But one of the AA or the 12-step things is, if you got to make it right, go out and make it right. You know what I mean? Because sometimes you get stuck and you feel, well, I screwed that up.
Right.
Well, go out and try to
And
make a difference.
let me piggyback on that, Tom, because I've just went through a lot of stuff. When you think about working on your life and you think about fixing things that need to be fixed and you think about standing up and trying, sometimes it can be overwhelming. You think
It
that
can.
it's like this road is going to be so hard. But let me say this. The times that I've had where I had to turn around and go toward God instead of, and fix things, those are some of the best moments in my life, because it's raw and it's real. And it's like, that's when things happen in my life that define me and make me into the person that I am today. And so it's also very rewarding to turn around. Wherever you're at,
isn't that one of the reasons too why the Bible says to rejoice in
Yeah,
trials? One of
definitely.
many.
Well, I
Again,
think-
isn't one of the prerequisites for coming to Christ that you hit rock bottom?
Yeah.
You have to cry out. Blessed are the poor in spirit.
Yeah.
And he'll make you into something. Now, I'm not into Christian t-shirts. I'm going to be into them more this next week. But I have one shirt that I've worn to church a couple times, and I had to make 100 or 200 of them. Jesus saved my life. He literally has. And I just did a sermon, and I will do the third part of that sermon series, or I just did it last week. I'm through with it. But I did a sermon on the fact that Jesus can't be Savior without being Lord. What does a Savior do? He goes around saving people. That's what Jesus did. He saved me from losing my marriage. He saved me from dying a premature death, on and on and on. So what I'm trying to tell our audience out there today, if any of them are suicidal or have invited someone to come and listen to this that's suicidal, when the disciples first started following Jesus, Jesus said to them, in fact, the reason they followed him is he said, come and follow me and I'll make you fishers of men. Or in other words, come and follow me and I'll make you become something that you are not. I will do that. And so I'm telling people out there today, when you come to the Lord, you learn a whole new way of living. Every time you fail at something, if you have the right spiritual perspective, the Bible says in Romans 8:28 that I will cause all things to work together for good. It's a whole new way of living. He'll make you become something. His spirit will become stronger than that depression that you're experiencing.
Yeah.
Again, what you said was one of the biggest tricks of the enemy when you're depressed and suicidal is, I can't do devotions. I can't pray. That's the very thing that will give you the strength to overcome.
Well, and that's just it. I came out of this with with much more of an appreciation for religious habits. I think that there's something to it. There really is. Like, why did Jesus tell us to drink a little bit of wine or juice and a cracker and eat a cracker occasionally? For your soul,
remembrance, yeah.
Like, why would he tell you to do that? And it's because it's symbolic to what he did, right? And it's just literally remembering. It's just literally reminding ourselves. I was talking to somebody today, and I said, and this is kind of a cool thing that I want to move on. I was encouraging a friend of mine who wants to be a leader in the church, and I said, you know why I don't worry about the outcome, that I'm not stressed about, where this whole thing is headed. And I kind of left him on the hook a little bit. And I said, it's because I have a secret strength that not a lot of people have. And of course, the strength's God. That's the easy answer. But I said that. I said, it's God, but it's also more than that. It's that I understand the three distinct personalities of God and his roles. So sometimes I just need a dad, right? Sometimes I just need a dad to talk to and to hear me out and to feel for me, right? Sometimes I need a Holy Spirit to guide me, right? To just show me what to do. And all the time I need a savior and I need a Lord and I need someone to serve with, right?
Yeah.
And it's like understanding the three parts of who God actually is and what he can do for you. I mean, that right there that'll keep you safe from.
And then going back to my sermon series, in the church world, in some places, we have really come up with this crazy belief that you can have Jesus as Savior, but not Lord. And that's not biblical. Jesus wants to save you, but in order to save you, he has to become your Lord, master, owner, chief. And if he's the master, owner, and the chief and the boss, you will do what he says. And when you do what he says, that leads to you being saved.
And people probably get confused or frustrated with that term Lord. Like you don't, we use it as a bad term, like don't lord that over me, or I'm your or somebody in a relationship or in a boss and an employee or something, they do what I say, follow my rules or else. It's not like that. When I think of Jesus being Lord, I think of him being like the medieval times, like he's like the king that has the gear on with him and he has a sword in his hand and he's in the front and you're riding next to him and you're riding right behind him. You're going where he goes. You're fighting the battles he's fighting. You're doing the things that he's calling you to do. And it's a much different thing, right? It's a much different thing. It's saying, hey, we're going to get together and we're going to not ignore the injustice.
Well, in the beginning, the word Lord, kurios, was meant to be sir.
Yeah.
Sir.
Right.
Giving someone respect.
Yeah.
It went on down the road to gain a new meaning of being master, owner.
Well, it's boss. And I'm not saying it's a negative thing. That's how I see it. I see it as like God saying, hey, like, I am king. Follow me to this battle. Follow me to this battle. And it's just exciting to think about.
But he wants to save you, but he has to be Lord. Now, I said something, and I want to finish what I was meaning to say. I said I'm not a real proponent of Christian shirts, but I'm going to be more in the future. Some of you maybe have read about that thing that went viral about the man. Wasn't he in the Mall of America? Isn't that where he was at? And he had a shirt on that says, Jesus saves. And they told him, said, you'll either take that shirt off or leave the mall, because customers have come up and said that shirt offends them. Now, there was a little something on the back that might have made it more offensive.
But he didn't say anything to anybody. They just said the shirt alone.
Yeah, the shirt alone,
Yeah.
Jesus saves.
Yeah.
And so right now, as I said here, I'm ordering about 300, several more hundred shirts that says Jesus saved my life, because we're proud of that concept. And so again, not to, oversimplify it, but if you're out there and you're suicidal and you've never given God a try with your life, you need to come into him. Because doesn't he say in the word, he says, come unto me, all you that labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest.
That was the verse that Brian Welch, the Korn guitarist, that was the verse that he said got him to understand, and to trust. And he got that tattoo right afterwards. And it's so cool to see people like Brian who made a change and it stuck, because their belief was so deep and their understanding was so deep and almost childlike, right? Brian was
very childlike.
Was very like he's just like had a simple way of thinking. Like he would think about something and he would do it, and there's something to that too,
And again, talking to parents out there today, one of the problems we're seeing a lot in the church is that kids are going into depression and sometimes suicidal because they're being bullied at school. Mm-hmm. And I say to you parents, if you're in that kind of situation, we have great youth groups.
Yeah.
That's the culture they need to get involved in.
Well, not only are they being bullied at school, it's social media, right? Online bullying.
100%. Let me say something about youth groups too, because they're huge. I know a lot of people just like they don't really, they come to church, but their kids can stay home. They don't really, it's optional. One thing you need to know as a parent is that your kid, if you have a good relationship with your kid's going to tell you a lot of stuff. But one of the things I've learned we have a youth pastor, his name is Gennaro in our church. Your kid is going to be more likely to talk to that other young adult than they are going to talk to you about life problems sometimes. And having that access or that open door to another youth pastor or an adult or a young adult, another female leader in those youth groups is so key. And it's a good youth pastor. It isn't that youth pastor is taking the role of a parent. It's a partnership with a parent. And that is so huge that Gennaro's become my partner in helping me with my kids as they go through things. And that's not saying that Gennaro wears all these, he's not there to fix any of their problems. He's just there to partner up and basically double down on the things that Hannah and I are teaching in the home. And that's huge for us. So if you're a parent and you're like, man, your kid's not going to youth and they're struggling with all this stuff, start there. Just start getting your kids involved in that community and get to know your youth pastors, get to know your your junior high pastor, your youth pastor, your kids ministry. They are your guys' partners moving forward and raising your kids.
And what you have to realize too is that when kids become teenagers, very often they're not going to come to you, but they will go to that youth pastor.
100%.
You need to have somebody in their life that they feel good to go to when they're having problems.
Pastor, you said this many a times, many years ago, and still to this day, that you have to have somebody in your children's life. And it's up to you too, to make sure they do, because the volume of your voice is going to go down, but somebody else is going to go up. So you better have somebody there that they can respect, because otherwise there are plenty of groups and people out there that will want to raise your kids for you. And if you don't have a plan before you get there, what do they say? If you have no plan, if you plan, if you fail to plan, you plan to fail.
Yeah.
And I think with children, especially at the teenage years, your volume is going to go down, but whose will go up? Somebody's will.
Can I put a little plug in here for my book, Tribal Influence? You asked me to write that book, and I wrote it. And in Tribal Influence, I talk about kids, and they have this inborn desire to relate. And so they go to school, and if they're not a sports jock or whatever and don't fit in with the athletic crowd, then they have to find another crowd to be accepted in. It might be the brainy kids, and I'm in the intellectual crowd. I'm in the top of the class crowd,
Or musicians.
or it could be musicians, or it could be the choir. The kids need a group to relate to. And so you're very smart if you take them to church and let them get involved in that group. Yeah. They want someone that they can identify with.
Well, it's also important not to downplay that interaction with the youth pastor. I think it's huge. But like you said, the parent needs to be involved in the child's life.
Yes.
And one thing I appreciate about our culture is we really do push and support families to live life together. You have a lot of dads who, they have their hobbies, they're out doing their things. And Vince and I, we do our own things sometimes, but we always make sure to wrap around and spend most of our quality time with our families, right? And
it's funny now because Huntington's old enough where he can hang out, but he's so involved in sports. So he's like, Dad, you're going to go motorcycle riding? I can't do that because I might get hurt and now I can't swim. So it's like now I'm like getting to, but so now I'm like hey, you want to go to the gym and swim? Let's go swim today. So it's like I get to
there
partner
are
with
some
them.
parents. Would you guys agree that there's some parents that just ignore their kids?
Oh, 100%.
Completely. They're not involved at all.
I think what's hard is when you're a kid and you're going through it, like your dad just said, you need somebody to go to. And if you don't have a good youth pastor in place or a good community youth group, it was funny because I said earlier, Jim was a huge monumental part and early on. And so was John Jesse early on, huge part. And then I met a friend named Josh Vietti my sophomore year, and you kind of took their place. I still needed that, their influence as youth pastor and partner, but it was cool to have that community. So having community, your kids are going to go to somebody, and if you don't give them an option, like Tom said, it's going to not end good.
The problem these days is they have another option that we didn't have. They can go online.
Oh,
and
big
find
time.
A friend, and that could lead them down a really bad.
Well, going
path.
back to tribal influence, I said in the book that sometimes when your kid goes to school, if he's not a sports jock and doesn't fit in with the intellectual crowd, doesn't fit in with the musical crowd,
Right.
he becomes very tempted to fit in with the outcasts, and a lot of them are into drugs and bad things. He she just wants a group to accept them.
My community, I just got to share this story. Sorry, Tom. My community was so in the church. Like we had all my friends went to the church, which was kind of a cool thing. We ended up going out and smoking weed. I had this little Volkswagen Bug, and we're like, we're all going to go smoke weed and go fishing. And so we all did it. One of the guys in the group, who was also one of the church guys, felt so bad about it, went and told the youth pastor. then the youth pastor came back to us and said, "Did you guys all smoke?" I'm like, "Who told you that?" He's like, "Well, this person did." I was like, "So even if we wanted to hide and run and try to do our own thing, it was always back to the community." And now I laugh.
And that
'cause
was
I'm
the
like,
worst of it.
That was the
Smoke
worst of
weed
it.
and
Yeah. But I'm just
fish.
saying that was God looking out for, even though at the time I was like, man, I can't, but it was just so cool to know that, I hope that if my kid ends up experiencing, I hope they never do. I told that was one of the things we talked about yesterday. I was like, I hope my kids do nothing I did. Like, I hope they,
And you know what? We're
hope they
not
don't.
pushing VBF. That's the
Right,
church
any
that we
church.
pastor at. But let me say this. No, not just any church.
right. Oh yeah.
That's the
Sorry.
problem.
You're right. Sorry.
As parents, we need to look at the churches we're going to.
Yeah.
We need to see their youth pastors,
Right.
see the people that's working in the Sunday school departments. We need to know who those leaders are. How many parents out there have ever even called your youth pastor up at the church you're going to and invite them to lunch and say, let's sit down and talk about my child.
Right.
Is he doing okay? Is he fitting in? As you said, it's a big responsibility to have kids. It's almost to the point to where do we force people to have a license to have kids?
Yeah.
Because
you got to have license to drive.
yeah.
You,
And so
I don't think you can give your parenting right to somebody else. Because like you said, it doesn't even have to be their church. There again, if you know maybe a coach that shares your beliefs system and your values, if you know a teacher, and this is scary nowadays, but there are teachers out there. My wife the other day had a couple parents come in and talk about their son. And my wife sat there and she goes, if you want some advice, I think your son needs to get involved in our after school programs with sports. And they go, that's right. And now all she did was comment on it, but she had been this student's teacher in second grade. So this is a good kid. You guys done a good job with him. But from my perspective, this is what he needs. So you have to be careful with that, but you can't give away your parenting rights.
And that brings up another thing is that society, our culture, our communities need adults to take responsibility and care about these kids. To care about them. I mean, you can tell there's a big difference between somebody who's caretaking and somebody who is really taking care. And there's kids that need that love and need that support.
And going back to the church, we put a lot of energy and prayer into choosing who's going to be over our youth.
Yeah.
When I was younger, our youth pastor hit the kid in the nose that was next to me. He got into a fist fight.
Wow.
And I think this lead pastor wasn't watching over who he was putting in charge of the youth.
Right.
So again, I say to you, get involved in a church, but pray about the church
Yeah,
you get involved
absolutely.
with. And go down and meet their youth pastors and talk to other parents whose kids are in those youth programs and say, is this a good church? So we could go on and on. We didn't even get to our subject today.
Well, it's funny because we started talking about mental and spiritual health. We ended on parenting. You might need a whole podcast on that. But that's what's fun about this podcast is we never know where it's going to go. It's a conversation, and you're a part of it. And so if you're listening to this and you like it, that you got something out of it, please share it with somebody else.
Please. Or share it with us too. And
Let us
encourage
know.
us and let us know
we're
you're
on
getting
Facebook.
something.
Our emails are on vbf.org as well. And you can actually just email us directly, and we will
Or
see
drop
it,
a YouTube
and
comment.
we'll
if
get
you're
back.
listening on YouTube.
A question. Ask us a question.
Yeah,
We
if you want to get
addressed.
into what I'm doing right now and you want a Jesus Saved My Life shirt,
Well, what's cool,
let us know.
yeah.
Or
Well,
get you
Tribal
one.
Influence book.
Our Tribal
Yeah,
Influence
I
book,
was just
yes.
about to say we don't do this to sell anything, but then you started to sell something. But it's true. We do this.
We'll
for
give
the
them to
love.
you.
Yeah.
We're not selling things necessarily.
You're probably
We'll-
giving away more of
you
your
probably
books
give
than
more
you've
stuff
sold.
away than
I
we
know you have.
sell.
We're doing this because we care, and we feel like God has called us to do it. And so we love you guys. Be safe if you're out there driving, whatever you're doing, and don't overcomplicate it. Just live your life. Do the best you can and let God do the rest. Right?
Yeah, love you guys.